What's the worst financial decision you've seen someone make? Story 1. Put everything in his girlfriend's name to hide assets he owed to the IRS. The girlfriend sold his business, cashed out his accounts, and ran. My spouse's father did this, sold his business to an employee for $1 to hide it during his divorce, and was shocked when suddenly the guy didn't magically give it back. He lost his entire business and inventory for $1. He was an abusive a-hole, so it couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. It only works if the other party has bad lawyers or you aren't going against a government agency. If you try to pull that off against the IRS or bankruptcy courts, they will unwind that transaction and make the other person give back the assets. You will then end up with one very, very pissed off judge who will rake you over the coals. It's a strategy idiots use and only ever works against other idiots. Story 2. A guy in my fraternity got $30K for an undisclosed reason. I'm guessing a family death or something, and he bet it all on the Yankees winning one game. They lost. A guy who lived on my floor in the dorms inherited $100K from his grandfather's estate. He was suddenly very popular, buying all the beer, pizza, new car, golf clubs, etc. He was living large. His parents showed up about a month later to attempt to help straighten him out and recover funds. The golf clubs and other items went to a pawn shop, and they even enlisted the RA to help watch out for the guy. Terrible for an 18 to 19-year-old to come into that kind of money out of nowhere with no reference or respect for how to handle it or how it was earned. When I was a student, one guy on my course came in proudly one day and announced he'd found 2 bookmarkers on the way to campus, each giving odds for a football soccer match that afternoon. One gave 7-2 on one team winning, the other gave 7-2 on the other team winning. He had taken everything he had, the student loan payment that he'd just received, so the next term's tuition fees and rent, plus any available savings, split it in 2 and placed both bets. He explained that the returned stake of the bet he won would offset the bet he lost, and the winnings would work out 75% more than the total amount he'd spent, no matter which team won. His face when I said, "Dave, what if it's a draw?" was beyond priceless. Everyone in the department went to the pub to watch the match. No goals were scored that day. Man, that's absolutely crazy. He didn't realize it, and it happened. Story 3. My awful aunt was the trustee for my grandparents' estate. When they passed, she decided to sell their house to a random realtor who put a leaflet on the door. To the realtor, not with the realtor. It wasn't put on the market, and the aunt rejected a matching offer from me after I argued hard to actually list the house and have people bid on it. The realtor slapped a new coat of paint on it and sold it a couple of months later for literally $1 million more than she bought it for. I should have, but there was a lot going on at the time. I had newborn twins with 2 pre-existing kids already at home, and I was grieving the loss of my grandfather, who was one of my best friends my entire life. There were also more beneficiaries involved, so the personal loss to myself wasn't the full $1 million. Not that it would still be worth it, but with everything going on at the time, I just didn't have it in me. And as you can probably imagine, my aunt would have dragged it out and fought tooth and nail to the bitter end. It was probably worth it for me to be able to cut that branch of the family off and walk away, rather than have to deal with them in such a manner for God knows how long. I am so extremely sorry for you and pissed off. I too had a terrible aunt. My aunt gambled her $80K inheritance from grandma. Later, she tried to take all the inheritance that was meant to be divided among the 4 remaining siblings when her sister died, even going to my mom to get her to sign her share over, which mom did, part because of the elderly, part because she didn't want the money, not caring that she had kids struggling herself. I'm thankful my sister heard about it and reminded her that at least 2 of her sons and 1 of her daughters were near destitute, and that I had a massive uni debt I needed help paying off. My mom decided to sign away her share of the superannuation, bit into the bank account balance. My aunt was pissed she didn't get it all and had disowned everyone in the family. She's a narc and only obsessed with the veneer of money. Really pathetic. Another time, she had claimed grandma's antique Singer sewing machine as her inheritance, thinking it was worth thousands. Later, when she found out it was only worth about $50, she threw it in the skip bin. My dad fished it out for me, but my sister claimed it, which is more than fine. My sister restored it and displayed it in her house. A couple of years later, my aunt visited and saw the sewing sewing machine and went on a tirade that it should have gone to a daughter, not a granddaughter. Despite my dad literally pulling it out of the skip bin my aunt had thrown it in. I'm glad Dad had secretly grabbed a blanket that belonged to Grandma as a kid, had an older German fairy tale stitched on it, and gave it to me before my aunt learned of it, and threw it out too. My sister had also claimed that though. This reminds me of my grandmother. When her brother, my uncle, passed, she was trusted by him to distribute his inheritance among his kids. Instead, she kept it all. That side of the family then cut our side off completely and forever due to her actions. My grandfather built a cottage on a lake up north that we went to every summer. The grandkids grew up loving the place. Without giving anyone in the family a chance to keep my passed-on grandfather's cottage, my grandmother sold it. "I need the money," she said. My family was devastated. We would all have pooled together whatever it cost, but we weren't given the chance. It was a double lot in cottage country. She could have just sold the extra lot of land. When she passed, she had a penthouse condo on the beach in Fort Myers, a house in a prestigious area of Toronto, and hundreds of thousands in the bank. She never needed the money. It's crazy how close relatives can pull stuff like this. Story 4. My brother's ex fell for a Craigslist scam. She found a motorcycle and the guy needed money up front to pay bills before she even saw it. We told her don't do it, it's a scam. She said she already sent $1,000. Of course, he was never available to show her the bike, and we found out from my brother after they broke up she actually continued sending him money in hopes of getting the motorcycle. I think she was out $3,000 by the end. My ex-husband got cheated out of tens of thousands of dollars just by being an over-trusting and underthinking seller. He had always wanted a piano his entire life, and one day a friend's father had passed and left them an incredibly amazing and very old piano that she had no use for, so gifted to him. He loved those things so much, turned it and fixed it up. Then a giant ball of tragedy struck that put us in a very bad financial situation, causing us to no longer afford where we were currently living and having to move to his family's old home, which is off the mainland and on an island. Being that the only way to get anything moved was by ship and extremely expensive, he had to sell a lot of things, and much to his dismay, the piano was just too big and too heavy to afford to ship there. So he put out a listing to sell it for a very reasonable price. It was an antique in spectacular condition, made in the early 1900s and was worth at the very least 80 grand. He listed it for a fraction of what it was worth due to time constraints on having to get rid of it before the move. Someone contacted him and offered to buy it, and here is where he did something monumentally stupid. The buyer offered to have a truck come and pick up the piano in a very quick time frame and asked if it would be alright to give my husband $1,000 up front and then the rest in 2 weeks when they got paid. I know he was under a lot of stress, but damn, that was dumb. You do not let anyone walk away with an incredibly valuable item without it being paid in full. As I'm sure no one here is shocked by, the person never paid anything else on the piano and just disappeared. The money from that sale alone was pretty much all we were going to live off of until he was able to secure a new job in the new location. Scammers are truly awful, and many people need to learn not to be so trusting. It's sad, but it's just how it is. I was at a business meeting once, and all the owners of businesses from across the country meeting for our annual organization conference. One guy I was at the table with asked me if I knew much about Venmo. I guess cause I'm about 30 years younger than this guy, who owns and operates a very successful business. He asks me if there's any way to send more than $10,000 over Venmo, because that's apparently the limit. I asked him why in hell he was trying to Venmo someone that much money, and he launched into a story. He listed his wife's car online and got an immediate reply. At this point, I already knew it was a scam. The guy sent a check for the car, a registered check, sight unseen. But get this, it was for $10,000 more than he'd asked for. What a mistake, right? So the guy just asked if he could Venmo the difference. I told the guy straight up that's a scam. Don't Venmo anything. He was like, but it's a registered check. Yeah, doesn't matter. It's a scam. Other people at the table also told him it was definitely a scam. He seemed to accept it, but I still don't think he believed us. I often wonder if he sent that money anyway. All it takes is one person like this out of 1,000 and those scammers stay in business. Story 5. A friend of mine who is very bad with money and his girlfriend bought some sort of water filtration system from a door-to-door salesman. He has to pay something like $300 a month for this filtration system. He was all stoked because it came with a free set of pots and pans. Fast forward a year and his girlfriend has broken up with him, moved out of the house, and he's had to sell his home because he can't afford to live there. The water filtration system is now sitting in a storage unit where he still pays $300 a month for it because he's on a 2 or 3 year contract. Sorry, the details are fuzzy. We have great water quality in my area. I work for a government agency in building maintenance. We get hit up by water filter and air filter clowns every couple of months wanting to sell us some bullshit. We are obligated to sit through their sales pitch, so we aren't biased, but we all know it's bullshit snake oil. The homes and buildings that do need specialized systems like these usually have them installed on day one. If I had to guess, it's a hard water filtration system. It's a very common scam. Have you ever got one of those scratch tickets in the mail or under your windshield at the grocery store? They're always a winner. They'll say you won a new game console or money or maybe a car. Well, the catch is, the only way you can claim the prize is to sit through one of those hard water filter sales pitches. I read up about them once and went down a rabbit hole. They'll take your tap water and almost always say it's bad and needs the system. But I've read stories of people having them test filtered bottled water and get the same bullshit result. The only thing I'm not sure of is if you can get the prize if you just sit through the sales pitch and decline to buy it. If so, it might be worth the song and dance. If all I need to do is sit through an hour of nonsense and get an Xbox, I'd totally do it. I couldn't buy the system if I wanted to because I'm renting anyway. LOL. That, and I don't have an extra $15K for water. Nothing good ever comes with free pots and pans. Story 6. My supervisor took out a loan against their 401k to pay their rent because their credit cards were maxed. 2 weeks later, they bought a brand new $60K Lincoln with basically nothing down because her daughter just had a baby and I need a bigger car for that. I know a CPA who will sit you down for $200 an hour to go over your finances, to help you get squared away. 99 out of 100, he's worth every penny. He worked with a couple who drove separately in brand new high-end cars. They hadn't saved for retirement and wanted to retire in 10 years. They claimed their only debt was $20K in credit cards. With their utility bills and credit cards, he couldn't figure out how they weren't putting away $30K a month. These folks were broke. Then they mentioned both car payments. Well, that's called debt. Why didn't you list that? Didn't think it was debt. Anything else that you were paying on monthly? 2 mortgage payments. Sell a house. They're both in the same house. Why? That's how we got the credit cards down to $20K. It went on like that for a full hour before he said something like, "Look, there are classes you can take on finance, and you're going to need a better understanding than you have before I can begin to help you." This is always what surprises me, is that anyone can be absolutely terrible with money. I knew a girl who was an accountant, and I had just assumed that she was good with her money. I heard from another friend that was closer to her that she had a bunch of credit card debt. I was gobsmacked. How? She was a reasonably high-up accountant at a big-ish business. Surely she, of all people, would be aware of how freaking bad credit card debt is and how it can mess you for years and years, to the point where you'll have paid double to triple what you got out of the card. I guess it goes to show that anyone can be bad with money, no matter what you do or how clever you are. Story 7. My cousin spent 100% of her inheritance and took out a lien on her home to buy a second home in the mountains. Thing is, it was being pushed over by a mountain, and they thought they could fix it. I went and saw it, and every door jamb was crooked, and the doors wouldn't shut. They took me down into the basement where they were trying to use a beam to stop the mountain from pushing on the home. I was just like, what the hell are you doing? That won't solve anything. Fast forward 6 months and they asked me for $50K to help, and I declined. Fast forward a year and the home collapsed, and now they owe over $300,000 plus for a home that doesn't exist, and if they don't make the payments they lose their other house too, because they used the original home as collateral and could not get insurance on the second home. Total money lost upwards of $700K. I sold my old house to someone like this. I lived in a house for a while that was on the edge of a steep hill that ultimately ended up in a 30-foot deep ravine. It was fine when we bought it, but we knew erosion was going to be an issue and we would need to build a retaining wall. But then life kept throwing us curveballs and we wound up not being able to afford it. The house had a wraparound deck and erosion started pulling the deck down the hill. The deck was bolted to a side room where it should have been bolted to the concrete slab that started pulling away from the house along with the deck. Within 3 years, there was a full 1-inch gap from where the room had pulled away from the rest of the house. Our poverty fix was to fill the gap with spray foam. We tried to hire a guy to fix it, and he spent a day on it and said it can't be fixed and never came back. So we sold that shit as is and ran as far as we could from it. The guy who bought it was like, I can fix that, no problem. I often wonder how it worked out, because the few times I've driven past it in the years since, there's still no retaining wall as far as I can tell. No one is living there. How do you not insure a house like that? Story 8. A coworker I used to have worked every second of overtime he could for several years to save up for a house. When he applied for the house loan, he based his mortgage payment on all of the overtime he'd been working. I tried to tell him that wasn't a good idea, but he didn't want to hear it. He ended up divorced a few years later because his wife got tired of him always working. When my wife and I bought our house, we based it on just my income, so if she lost her job or I lost mine, we would be fine. Everyone told us we should get a super nice house with our income since we could afford it. 2 years later, my wife lost her job and now we have nothing to worry about. No added stress. It was the best decision we have made. Though we have been lucky in the financial sense, all things considered, my spouse and I got a mortgage based on an amount that we could still afford if one of us lost our job or had to quit working for any reason. We were approved for up to $800,000, and we wanted a third of that. This was the pre-COVID craze, so houses were still affordable in our area, and we got a modest house for that amount. The bank and most of my spouse's family thought we were crazy for not taking the full $800K, while interest rates were dirt cheap. Our forward-thinking decision got us through job changes, my university degree, COVID job loss, and some much-needed renovations, and we fully paid the house off before the sudden rate hikes. So, I'd say it's worth it all around. Story 9. Worked with a 50-year-old who looked like the arse end of a rhino and hated anyone not from England, who sent 10k pounds to his fiancée in Thailand he'd never met for a boob job, clothes, and flight over. Oddly enough, her naked pics and promises of anal when she visited stopped once the money had been sent. We had to talk to one of our employees a couple of weeks ago about something like this. He's not the best looking or most intelligent guy, but he's a nice guy. Apparently, he met a girl online who lives in Atlanta. We saw her Facebook page and you could tell something was fishy. She was this smoking hot blonde with only 4 pictures, all in skimpy tops and lingerie. No other posts on her page, just pictures. She told him she was single and had no family. They had all passed away. He decided a week after meeting her that he was going to quit his job and move to Atlanta to live with her and help her rent an apartment. His fellow employees and his family kept telling him it was a scam or catfish and not to go through with it. He got pissed and apparently had suicidal thoughts and checked himself into a mental hospital for a couple of days, but eventually he agreed and didn't go through with it. Yikes. There's this older guy I used to work with who had these scammers all over him on Facebook. I don't know if they were all connected, but somehow all of these obvious fake profiles found him and added him. These are all profiles showing very attractive young women in skimpy clothing that was obviously just ripped from Google, and he will carry on full conversations with them in the comment section on his pictures. Talked about their day, saying that she will be visiting his area soon and would love to meet with him. He is so handsome and funny, and I feel really bad for him because he's an older single attractive dude with no social skills, and he's being led to believe that all these women want him. If I was closer to him, I would have sent him a message telling him that all his profiles are fake. My very large, very introverted friend from high school met a girl from the Philippines on OkCupid years ago. He was super hesitant to tell people because he knew what they would think. When he told me, I was super happy for him, but he absolutely under no circumstances should send her any money. Flowers, small gifts, etc., absolutely, but never just straight cash. They've been together for over 5 years now and even went to the Philippines a few times for work and for fun. He's met her family, he spent weeks with her, somehow amazingly, he found love thousands of miles away. She would be here now if they could get her visa approved, but that has been a major problem for a while now. It's crazy to me that people are still getting catfished in 2023. Story 10. A guy I dated for a short time had been joining an MLM scheme selling insurance. I listened to his monologue and told him I had no money. He was furious and tried to sell insurance to our waiter at the restaurant. He failed again. I'm still laughing today. He was no good guy. People who get sucked into MLMs are so unbearable. I tell them up front it's a bad idea, get out, and don't expect a single sale from me. I will not perpetuate that scam, but we are still friends otherwise. Usually works out fine, but one time one woman friend invited us to dinner without telling us it was an MLM pitch. We find out after we almost finish eating, and I bluntly say, "No, I told you not to do this." Her and her other friends' retort was, "Why did you eat the food then? You lied to us, you nincompoops. You're just mad." I feel absolutely no shame or anxiety saying no. World Financial Group. My brother-in-law brought in a guy who gave us, me and my wife, a presentation. The presentation started with these exact words from him: "I am going to present you something amazing, and if at the end of this presentation you're not convinced to join, then you either didn't understand anything or are not interested in making money." Yeah, in the end, we both said no. The look on his and my brother-in-law's face was priceless. They were pissed. It was fantastic. I didn't even know there were insurance MLMs. The disease is spreading. Story 11. My brother and his wife were in massive debt, didn't work high-paying jobs, and could no longer afford their 2-bedroom apartment while trying to pay off their debt. They moved back home into our parents' basement. A week before they moved in, they built a computer, and a year after that, they consciously decided to try and get pregnant, which they did, while still living in the basement and knowing they hadn't improved their financial state whatsoever. I'm so scared this is going to be me. I ended up having to move back in with my parents after going on disability. I lived on their couch for the first 18 months. My mom's a hoarder, and it took her that long to clear her things off of a bed. I'm paying rent from my SSDI, but nowhere near market rent, and I couldn't afford market rent for the area I live in now anyway. My parents have been amazing through this, but I'm so worried I'm going to end up scrounging off them for the rest of their lives. I don't understand how someone could be comfortable with this kind of living situation and not make any efforts to improve it. I have a couple of clients like this. They are staying in one of their grandmother's homes, fully paid off. They pay her $1,000 for rent every month and cover property taxes. They have 2 children, I think, and make enough to cover everything, but it's probably tight. Well, apparently they haven't been paying grandma rent for the last year because they couldn't afford it. They also didn't know they needed to cover the property taxes, so they haven't paid that in 4 years, so the bank got involved and threatened to foreclose. Their parents had no idea how bad it was, so shit hit the fan about a month ago. The thing is, they were considering buying a tractor and recently bought a boat. Don't take the loan unless you already have a solid plan to pay it off. It never ends well. Story 12. Had a coworker with 5 kids who could all go to USC for free once he had worked there for 15 years, even if he quit. He quit at 14.5 years for a job that barely paid more than he made at USC. Cost all 5 kids a free education at a top school since he couldn't wait for 6 more months. My college ex was going to our private, well-known uni on full scholarship because his father worked in security and had for years. He had a younger brother with his eyes set on the college who was like 4 years younger as well. Dad starts doing some stupid thing, can't remember if he had an affair or had started going to his car to sleep, in his son's sophomore year, and was fired before the junior year began. His son was set to graduate with a high-paying degree, with good connections debt-free, but now he has like $60K in debt. Is that all there is to the story? My ex's stepdad left Boeing right before he would have earned a considerable pension, but it turns out he didn't leave. He was fired for carrying on an 11-year-long affair with another coworker who worked in a different part of the country at the company's dime, and communicating using company email. Generational bag fumble. Story 13. My maternal grandmother bought an 8-plex to avoid capital gains when she sold her large house. The apartment complex was in the red and needed a lot of repairs. She hired my father to do them and be the on-site manager. The place started making money. My mom divorced from my dad, was mad that my grandma bought it in the first place, then hired my dad, then was proved wrong because it was making money. My grandma was in her 90s and my mom pressured her for years, so my grandma finally sold it. That place is in a high market area and is now worth millions. My mom made a poor financial decision based on petty spite. I mean, it doesn't sound that bad to me. I imagine they still made a lot of money from the sale, and your grandma was in her 90s, and your mom clearly didn't want anything to do with it, as it was going to be left to her. Yeah, this one definitely isn't as bad as some of the others I've heard. Story 14. Knew someone who answered those scam emails thinking they would get rich. Last I heard, he lost around $50K, emptied out his savings account and maxed out credit cards. left in debt, and had to move back with ailing parents. Not close to them at all, but more like a friend of a friend of a friend's cousin. The guy would just not listen. Genuinely thought he was going to be a millionaire. They kept stringing him along until the bitter end, and then poof. The biggest concern his friends had was him trying to milk his ailing parents for their last nickel and dime. Fortunately, he wised up and knew he had. The last I had heard of him, he was at an hourly job somewhere and was trying to get out of debt. This is why everyone should have played RuneScape in 2007. Get scammed for your virtual currency, folks, and learn your lesson. I remember this one time playing Diablo 2. There was a sorceress trying to trade an item with someone, but claimed their trading screen was broken. So instead, they should both drop their items on opposite sides of this big rock or something. Then they would both run clockwise and pick up their items. And I'm watching this thinking something strange is going on here. You can't use spells like telekinesis, a spell to pick up stuff at a distance, in the town. So the sorceress can't just drop their thing, steal the other person's, and bail. What could it be? Turns out you couldn't use spells in the town except for telekinesis. And so I learned a lesson in online scamming at some unlucky player's expense. If they refuse to go through the official channels, there's a reason, and it's usually not one that ends well for you. Never played the game, so I was expecting another player to suddenly appear and take the item. Story 15. A guy I worked with found that check cashing places were offering $15,000 no questions asked loans. The interest rates were freaking insane. I begged him not to do it, but he impulsively went on a lunch break and got $15,000 in cash and deposited it into his bank account. This was 6 years ago. He is still struggling because of it. He lost his wife and kid because he drank every penny of it in the summer. He got eviction notices, and the stress was too much to the point where he had a psychotic break that lasted for months. He is pushing 40, lives alone, can't see his child, hasn't had sex in a few years, and is forgotten by most of his friends because he was delusional and hallucinating for months. Yeah, those shady lending companies operate on Native American reservations, so they don't have to follow state usury laws, and they can charge like 100% interest. A $15,000 loan costs like $80,000 by the time it's finally paid off. It's crazy how people can come in and you're giving them money knowing you're going to mess up their whole life. No morality at all. Story 16. They got married to someone heavily in debt. The person kept their financial situation from them until after they were married. My ex-husband did that to me. He concealed about $12,000 of credit card debt from me. When I found out about it, he said he ran it up buying Taco Bell after work every night. We lived in different countries for the first year of our marriage, since I wasn't born in the US, so I was going in rather blind in hindsight. Turned out it wasn't just Taco Bell, but also commissioning people online for X-rated My Little Pony videos. Hundreds of dollars, lol. Edit. Also just remembered he blew hundreds of extra lives for Candy Crush as well, and only stopped when he saw a South Park episode making fun of freemium games. It culminated in him getting a loan for $12,000 from his father. His father is an attorney, so naturally he drew up a loan agreement for my ex to sign. What I didn't know was his father also added a line for my signature and my ex forged it. I found that out when he randomly mentioned it to me a week or so later, and I am sure to this day he still believes that's perfectly okay and very legal and cool, I guess. He sent it back to the wrong address, so his father never got it. I texted his father ahead of time to let him know the signature was forged anyway, so no harm was done there. I get wanting help with debt, especially since I'm good at saving money. Just don't steal it from me. Ask. I'm happy to help a partner with that where I can. I'd already paid off an auto loan for him in the past, so I guess he just assumed he could help himself to my money. And you know, we were married. I understand the concept of communal property, but I had the money prior to the marriage, and he forged my signature. It was the beginning of the end, really. My trust in him vanished completely. People told me I'd wind up with half of his debt and half my savings gone if we divorced. I got lucky though. He had a very high-paying job, 6 figures right before I left, and paid off all of his debt. We agreed to leave with what we came in with. Savings and retirement are intact for us both. Leaving with most of your savings and dignity intact seems like the best-case scenario for marrying a brony. Thanks for watching until the end. If you have a similar story that you would like to share with us, please leave it down in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave us a like and don't forget to subscribe. For more videos like this one right now, please stop by our channel. Thanks again, and see you next time.